Hi everyone, I'm Jane, and today we're gonna paint some old books with a candle and flame. Now I did this whole painting except for the background in Pallet Knife, but if you prefer not to do it with a palette knife, you can definitely do this painting with a paintbrush. The techniques would be very similar. Make sure you check out the video description below for a full list of materials, and let's get started. To start out, we're gonna lay down some colors that are gonna give the illusion of a glow from our candle on this side, and then slowly getting darker on this side. And I wanna just do this kind of quickly. So I'm gonna use my 2-inch flat brush. And today I'm using an 8x10 canvas with the plastic still on it for a palette because I ran out of plates. And it's nice and smooth, and this is gonna help when I'm mixing colors for the palette knife later. So that worked out. So I'm gonna load up with some titanium white and yellow oxide. I'm not really trying to blend these colors together. I'm just gonna get some on each side. And then maybe just a hint of burnt umber. And I'm just gonna start kind of doing it in all different directions. If you wanna get really detailed and make it look like wood grain here for a bookshelf, you could absolutely do that. I'm just laying the color down in all different directions. Get some more. And as I start working my way out, I'm going to pick up a little bit more burnt umber so that it appears a little darker. If you don't have a 2-inch flat brush, you can use a 1-inch. I'm just using it so that the paint goes on a little bit faster, because I don't want to spend a lot of time on this background. I'm going to pick up more burnt umber this time. Remember, when you're doing things like this, flat pressure to lay paint down, light pressure to dust them together. You don't have to worry too terribly much about the very bottom, because we're going to add a table or some kind of a ledge, a shelf that the books are sitting on. I just picked up the burnt umber that time because I still have yellow and white on here. And I want this side to be a little bit darker because it's farther away from our light source. Now for the bottom here, we're actually going to do that in the palette knife, but I'm going to pick up some burnt umber and just draw out the line so that I can make sure that my books all sit right on top of it. So I'm just using the edge of the brush, and I'm going to draw a line straight across. If you need to use some kind of a ruler or something to get a straight line, you can do that. I'm just going to freehand it. Okay, there's our background. Now I'm going to get my blow dryer and dry this. When you're working with palette knives, you technically don't have to have the background be dry. But the reason I'm going to dry it is so that I can take my chalk and draw on where I want my books and the candle and everything. So I'm going to let this dry, and then we'll be back and we'll draw on our books. All right, so my canvas is dry now, and I have my chalk, and I'm going to start with my book over on this side. Now you can arrange your books however you like. If you like more of the books that are laying down and stacked on top of each other, you can do that. I'm just going to make some that are leaning over here, and then one laying down over here that our candle's sitting on. So I'm going to start up here where the corner, we're going to pretend like this is the edge of the bookshelf and our book is leaning up against that. And I'm going to have this book just barely leaning, just a little bit. If you want it straight up and down or have a heavy lean, that's okay too. So I'm going to start right about there and bring it almost straight down with a little bit of a bend. Not a bend, an angle. Don't get too crazy with trying to make sure that these lines are perfectly straight and even. When you start painting it in, you can make any adjustments. This is just chalk, so it's not a big deal. What is a big deal is this next part. You need to make sure that when you draw your line off at the top here, that it's 90 degrees to this. So 90 degrees means perfectly square. So the corners of your canvas, this is a 90-degree angle. So you don't want it to be like this or this, you want it to be square. And you can do this as many times as you need. That's not quite square. That's about right. So I'm gonna have this be a nice wide book, And then this line that I bring down, when I'm drawing it down, I'm going to be paying attention to this line to make sure that I have them the same all the way down, because you also don't want them to be like that. Or maybe you do. If your books have been sitting in a wet basement and they're getting all expanded, maybe they would be kind of crooked. And 90 degrees off of the bottom here. Put that corner right on your line here. Don't have it be hovering above, because then you might end up having one of your books look like it's floating. So we're gonna go 90 degrees off of that. That's not 90 degrees, Jane. There we go. And straight down onto it. So there's our first book. It's a little narrow here, or else it's a little fat here, but when I paint it in, I'll fix that. So I'm gonna do another one. I'm gonna start a little bit lower, because if it's leaning on it, if I make it the same height, but it's still leaning, then that tells your eye that if they were standing up, it would be a much taller book. And I want them all to seem like they're probably about the same size. So I'm gonna start right about here. It's about 1.5 inches down from the top of this book. And I'm gonna make this one at a little bit more of an angle. Come 90 degrees off of the line I just drew. We'll make this book just a little more narrow than the other one. Follow this line down to make sure that they're even width all the way. You can actually take this line all the way to the ground, because I'm going to put another book right next to it, so that'll just be the edge of that book. 90 degrees here for the bottom. And then we'll do another one. I'm going to make this next one be at this exact same angle, so it's fully leaning on this book, not like here. So I'm just going to go 90 degrees right off of that. This one is going to be a little bit narrower. And straight down in line with the other line. 90 degrees here. And connect those two. Our next book is going to be laying down, and I want it to be touching this book here to make it seem like it's holding that one from sliding. But if this book weren't here, maybe these books would slide and fall. But they're resting up against it. So I'm going to put a straight up and down line right at the corner of that book. And then straight across. You can probably hear my dogs tap dancing out there. I apologize. So this is a little bit of a fatter book, but you can make it as narrow or as fat as you like. Our candle, I'm going to put it right about here. I'm going to make a straight line on that side. And I'm making it kind of a tall candle, so the flame is actually going to be up about in this 1/3 area. That's going to make this interesting and dynamic, because we'll have the flame up here, which comes down to the candle that's also on this 1/3, down to this book that's in the 1/3, and then it's going to shoot your eyes over to the other books and up. And that's the kind of flow you want to look for when you're making a painting. Don't put things dead center or all on the same level. Look for ways that you can make the viewer's eye move through the painting and back to certain elements. Okay, so I have my line there for the edge of the candle. I'm going to kind of do a scoop and back up a little bit, and a rounded corner here to bring it down again. And then our flame is going to be, I don't want it to be too high up off the top of the candle, so I just put it about 1/2 inch above that line. And that's just to give me an idea of where that flame will be. Now we're going to start doing our palette knife, and I'm going to use this small trowel knife. You can use whatever you're comfortable with or whatever you have. This is just the one that I decided to use. And I decided to use it because I can get it flat, but I can also put my hand on the canvas so I can control the pressure. It's got a nice straight edge on 2 sides, and I'm going to use both of those sides. And I just like how smoothly it travels compared to some of the other shapes of knives. Now I've decided my colors are going to be green, red, brown, and then blue. But those colors are optional, and you can do your books in any colors you like. But what I'm going to do to make all of those colors a little bit more cohesive is I'm gonna use the burnt umber, burnt sienna, and yellow oxide in all of the colors. That's gonna help me get a consistent shadow and a consistent light on all of these. So I'm gonna start with some burnt sienna, and I'm gonna bring it over here, and I'm gonna start mixing it in with my green. Now to mix it with a knife, you kind of smash it and swipe, scrape it, smash it, swipe, and do that until you're satisfied with the color that you have and the mixture. I'm gonna bring a little more green into that because I don't want it to be so brown. Now before you load your palette knife with the color you want, hold it up to your canvas and decide which edge you're gonna use for the direction you're going. So if I'm gonna come up here and draw this line, I know I'm gonna use this top edge. So I want my paint on that edge. So I'm gonna take my knife, put that edge in the paint, and scrape some away. You see that little ball of paint that I have on there? Now I can take it, hold it right up to that line, and swipe it down. Don't get too tidy with this. This is a palette knife painting, so you can expect to have some spots and blobs and streaks and irregularities, but I think that's what's fun about palette knife. Let's mix up a little more. Now down here at the bottom, I want to draw that line too, but I'm going to need that bottom edge of the knife. So I'm going to load up on that edge instead. Use that straight edge to your advantage to help you draw those lines. Notice I'm not worried about taking it all the way to the sides of the book. I'm going to do that with my other colors. Just get the rest of this and make sure I have a good amount on there. Smooth it out a little if you like. When you're smoothing paint with a palette knife, think of it like you're frosting a cake, right? If you're putting frosting on a cake, you're not going like that and leaving this super thin layer of frosting. You're trying to spread it smoothly and keep it from having holes in it. And now that I gouged it all off, I have to fight with covering those holes. Notice how I'm just kind of squishing into it and pulling it off. That kind of helps you fill in holes, and then you can smooth it out. There we go. All right, let's do the shadow side. I'm not gonna clean off my palette knife. I still have that burnt sienna green mixture. I'm just gonna grab some burnt umber and mix it in with a bit of green. I do want this side to be dark, so I'm gonna mix a little less green in it than I did with the burnt sienna. Again, decide what edge you're most comfortable with using, and then load up your knife. Hold it right on that edge and just swipe it in a little bit. Don't worry about getting them blended or a nice even line, just get it on there. We can come back and do any of that later. Let's see, I'm gonna use that side. And see how I'm kind of ignoring that chalk line there because it was too fat on that bottom part. So I just brought my line in a little bit more. Load up on the bottom edge so I can get this line here in the corner. There. Add just a bit more in here. And you can either leave it like that, super streaky, or you can take your palette knife, maybe wipe it off a little bit on the edge. And with almost flat, not really using the edge, using the knife almost flat and no pressure, just touch the paint, not the canvas, you can just kind of drag that down and smooth it out. So I'm just lightly smoothing it, not a whole lot. Okay. Now I'm gonna grab some yellow oxide and mix it in with my green. I'm gonna try and keep it away from too much of that brown mixture. Maybe I'll throw in a little bit of sienna. Decide what edge you're gonna use and load up on that edge. Same thing, draw your line and just streak it in a bit. Here's the other thing that I forgot to mention. When you're streaking these old books, I was kind of thinking of the old Reader's Digest books when I was painting this. The spines are not flat. I know a lot of modern books, they're very square, but these would almost be kind of rounded. And so when you're applying your paint, can you see how this has a very, very slight arc to it right here? It's not a direct straight across. It's got a little bit of an arc. So if you do that, that's going to give your book a little bit more dimension and make it seem like one of those old books with a nice rounded spine. But be careful not to do something like that, you know, give it a really deep curve. But if you do, like I just did, you can just smooth over top of it. Don't be intimidated by palette knife. Palette knife is actually a very simple tool. There. But I think I got a little too much of my highlight on this part right here. I don't think there would be that much. So I just got some more of my dark, swoop over it, and same thing here. Grab some of that. Great, now I'm gonna take my palette knife and just wipe it on a paper towel. Make sure you wipe off the edges here too, not just the flat part. All right, for our red book, we're gonna do the same thing. I've got some Alizarin Crimson. I'm gonna grab some burnt sienna, mix it in. I'm gonna keep it fairly red. Just remember, keep squishing and scraping. Load up on the edge and make your top line. Let's put a little bit more red into that, I think. Oh, it got a little green in there. That's all right. And smooth it out a little bit. Now I'm gonna grab some brown, trying not to get any of that green in there. And I'm gonna mix this color fairly dark, just like with the green. I'm gonna do a little bit more brown than red on this other side. Make sure that this book touches the green book. Don't be afraid to get it too close for fear that you're gonna streak some green into it. Again, because it's a palette knife painting, I think that you expect to see some little imperfections and streaks when the colors touch. See, I got a little green in there, and I'm not even worried about it. Just kind of tap at it if you're having a hard time getting a spot to fill in. You can drag it down the edge if you need to. All right, and now I'm just gonna smooth them out just a little bit. Grab some yellow oxide. Oh, I need more red. Well, no. I have some of this red that has the burnt sienna in it, so I'm actually gonna mix my yellow in with that so I don't get a bright orangey color. We're gonna get a little bit more intense with the highlights on this one than we did on the green book, because this one's just a little closer to the light. Remember to keep just a very slight curve in there. Very, very slight curve. We don't want the McDonald's arches. We just want a very nice light bend, almost imperceptible. A little blob on that side. And then I'm going to grab a little more yellow oxide and just squish the remaining paint on my palette knife into that. This is for our additional highlights. And I just picked up a tiny bit. I don't know if you can see how much I grabbed there, but I picked up probably about a quarter of the amount of paint that I was picking up before. Mostly along the top edge here. But I'll just use what's left on my knife down the side. Wipe it off on your paper towel. And then very lightly just streak over it, just to smear them a little bit. And if you feel like it's smeared too much and you lost your little curves, you can go back and add them back in just a bit. We're gonna do a couple of other things that are gonna give that dimension to say that it's a curved book in just a few minutes. Our next book, I'm gonna do just burnt sienna. Load up on the opposite side so I can get this bottom line that is not 90 degrees, but now it is. And I'm going to take some burnt umber, mix that burnt sienna with the burnt umber for my shadow side. Right up against this red book. I find that when I paint with palette knife, I get more paint on my hand than any other time. So if you're getting a ton of paint on your hand, that's cool. Just let it happen. Remember what I said before, the more paint you have on you, the more of an artist you are. So just let that paint cover you. And we'll give it a little bit of a darker low light at the very bottom edge. Some yellow oxide mixed with our burnt sienna. This book is the closest to the candle, so I think it's going to be a little bit more highlighted and brighter than some of the other ones. Down here, make sure that the corner touches where this other book is going to be. Now I'm just going to get yellow oxide, mix it in with what's on my knife, and put a brighter highlight up here in the corner. Wiped off my knife, and very lightly I'm just going to drag down this just a bit. So can you see how these three books are totally different colors, but there's still a cohesiveness between them. We don't have a dark brownish green with a bright red and a bright yellow. They've all got a very similar tone and color structure to them. Now for our blue book, we're gonna do the exact same thing, except when you mix these browns with the phthalo blue, you get a very dark color. In fact, mixing burnt umber with phthalo, you can get almost black. So we don't want this book to be too dark, so I am gonna add just the tiniest hint of white. So we're gonna start with our mid-tone. So I'm gonna grab some, whoa, that's kind of gross, some sienna and mix it with the blue. And notice already how much darker it made that blue. Quite a bit darker. So I'm gonna grab just a speck of white. You see it's just the tiniest speck of white and mix it in there. Now we've got like a nice teal color. Might even add just a little bit more. Let's draw the edge. Make sure you get right up to that brown book. And we'll fill it in. Just be careful you don't go down over top of your table that we're going to add at the bottom. All right, we'll get some burnt umber and mix it in. And this is where we're going to get that super, super dark color. And I'm gonna let this part be fairly dark because it's our shadow and we have the light right above it. So since the light is quite close to this book, the shadow that it's throwing on it might be a lot darker, especially in contrast to the light at the top. So don't be afraid to let your shadow be very dark. Load up on the appropriate side, and we're gonna draw the line for our table right here under it. But same thing, remember to make just the slightest curve in here. Very slight curve. I'm kind of running out of clean places to work. Now I'm gonna grab some of my yellow oxide and mix it in with my blue. That's gonna give me kind of a bright color, so I am gonna throw in just a little bit of burnt sienna to it. And the yellow is gonna make it kind of green, but that's okay, because the light from our candle is yellow. So the reflection on the book might be a little on the green side. Let's throw a little speck of white in there again. Just keep mixing it until it's the color you want. You can totally take your time with this part. Draw our top edge. Now, if you don't have a palette knife, or you don't like palette knives, or you're afraid of palette knives, a lot of people are afraid of them, you can absolutely do this with a brush. But I challenge you, if you're gonna use a brush, I challenge you to use it really the same way as a knife. Don't try and do brush strokes with it necessarily. Just try and use the edge of the brush and lay it down and move on, kind of like we are here. Let's grab a little more white. Actually, that's quite a bit of white, but that's okay. I'm just gonna mix what's on here with that white. Get a good bright color. Maybe just a hint of yellow. And we're gonna give it very slight highlight up here. cleaned off my knife, and we'll just lightly, whoa, not that much. Don't put too much pressure on it. We'll just lightly smooth those colors together a bit. Now here's where we're going to give some personality to our books. So again, I was kind of thinking of the old Reader's Digest books from the 50s and such when I was doing this. I have a big collection of those and I just love to look at them. So a lot of them, they have heavily covered bindings like this, and then on the edge there will be a little swath of color. And so that's what we're going to do. I'm just going to find a color on here that I like. I think I'm just going to take some yellow and load it up on one side. I'm going to start on my highlight side, right up against the edge, and in that same kind of motion, take a little bit of it across. And notice I let it kind of dot out. And I'm going to leave it like that because I feel like that helps insinuate that that goes into shadow. So what I don't want you to do is draw perfect rectangles on here, because those rectangles are going to be straight, and that's going to help take away from the illusion of a curved edge. Something else you can do is clean off your knife. I'm going to grab just a tiny spot of black at the top edge. See how it's just right up there at the top? And I'm going to do the same thing up here. You can get a little bit more so that goes most of the way across anyway. And my green paint is pretty dry, so it's not really smearing into it. You can do it when it's wet or dry, it doesn't really matter. But I am going to take the black almost all the way across. On my red one here, I kind of like this teal color. So I'm going to grab a bit of that, but I don't really want this line to be that wide. So after I've grabbed my little blob of it like that, I'm going to take it and kind of rub about half of it off, so I can get a narrower line. If you want to take your paper towel and really clean that part off so you can control exactly how wide that line is, that's fine. And I'm going to put this one up here. And I think I'm going to do a little black line underneath it. I don't think I'm going to add any of those color swatches to this brown book. I'm just going to do a couple of black edges. So we'll come from here. And maybe one down here. Try and find a place to rest my hand where it's not wet. On my blue one, I want kind of a leathery red color. So I'm going to mix some of that burnt sienna and a little bit of burnt umber. I'm going to come from right about here. Maybe some black just under it. And let's create our tabletop. So I'm going to start with my burnt umber. Maybe I'll grab just a hint of raw sienna. And the same thing, I'm creating the line with that top edge. I'm going to start right underneath this book so that I can make sure that that book is not floating in space. If it covers the edge of your book just a little bit, I think that that's okay, because to me that feels like it's saying that the book isn't sitting right on the edge of the shelf. It might be pushed back just a little bit. We're kind of looking at this from a low perspective, almost like the shelf is just below your eye level or right about eye level. Grab some sienna and some umber, and I'm not really mixing them. I'm just bringing my palette knife straight down. Again, make sure it's right up to the corner of that red book. As you work closer to the candle flame, you can start throwing in just a hint of your yellow oxide. And maybe a little bit less of the burnt umber. But if it's too much, like I just did, a little more burnt umber. and just cover it up a bit. Right up to the bottom edge of this blue book. Now I feel like the shadow under the book would be a little stronger than it is right here. The light from the candle can kind of angle down here, but if the book is right here, I don't feel like it would be quite that strong. I think it's definitely stronger than in this corner. Notice I'm getting a little bit of blue dragging down into there from my palette, but I'm not worried about it. I just grabbed burnt umber here. Even though I still have the other colors on my knife, I'm just picking up burnt umber. For this next part, clean off your palette knife really, really good, because we're gonna use white, and we don't wanna drag weird colors into our white. So I actually grabbed me a clean canvas and some more yellow oxide and titanium white. I'm gonna start with just titanium white. So I have quite a bit of paint, and I'm gonna utilize the edge of that and the point to get up in here where I want that to be a nice sharp point. You know, 'cause sometimes candles, they burn unevenly, so you get a little spot where it's higher than the other. I'm just gonna kind of create the rough shape there. Get rid of that little blob a bit. And down this side, it's okay if it has a rough edge, because that's where the wax is kind of running. And we'll carve out this edge here. And just lightly frost it over top of that other one. And load up on the opposite edge so that I can get my bottom line in. But because the bottom of this candle is gonna have wax pooled around it, you don't necessarily have to be real tidy with getting it up against that blue book. If it happens to kind of dollop over it, that's okay. Just be careful that you're not dragging too much blue paint in. And now I'm gonna grab a little bit of white or yellow and mix it in. I don't wanna make the candle appear that it's a yellow candle. I just wanna make it appear that the light is glowing through it and casting a little bit of a yellow glow to it. We're gonna do that over on this side here. Just a tiny bit more for this edge. But the light might not necessarily be permeating the candle down here, so I'm gonna leave it more white. But it's kind of thin right there, so I'm just gonna fill that out a bit. And keep sticking my hand in the wet brown paint at the bottom. If you get something a little out of line, you can just kind of scrape it away. Or get your damp brush like anything else and just kind of scrub it toward the originating color. Now we're gonna do the drips, and the drips are really fun. So I've got a blob of white pretty much on the end of the palette knife, and I'm just gonna kind of start coming outside of the edge of the candle here. It can be wiggly, it can be thicker, and it can be kind of blobby, all the way down to the bottom of the book. Out, maybe it's pooled right there a bit. A little bit more. And we're gonna take that. I'm putting no pressure on my knife. I'm just touching the paint together. And then just lightly drag it down. Kind of let it do what it wants to do. And you didn't even get to see that magic. All right, let's do that again. So I'm gonna bring it from over here. Just kind of let it do what it wants to do, skip where it wants to skip, and stop when it wants to stop. And that paint that I laid on here is very thick, so that's gonna help add to the illusion of melted, pooling candle wax. I'm gonna get one more blob on the bottom. You see how thick that is? And we're gonna lay it on top of the table here so that it looks like it's been dripping there. And actually, I've got it loaded up on the wrong side of my knife. I'm gonna load it up on this side so that I can use the edge to make sure the edge of the wax is flat here. And again, just kind of touching and letting the paint do what it's gonna do. There's no pressure. I'm not scrubbing it or pressing it into those colors. We're gonna coax it up a little bit. So there's like a little mound of wax there. Now our candle flame. So I got me some more white and just a tiny drop of cadmium yellow deep. You can use any yellow you want. I just wanted it to be a little bit brighter than the yellow oxide, but I'm still gonna use some of that because I don't want it to be quite as bright as the cadmium yellow. But I love the way the yellow oxide and cadmium yellow mix together. Mix in some white, get a fairly light color. Maybe not that light. And I'm not trying to mix those colors together perfectly. I don't know if you can tell, but there's still some marbling in there. I can see all of the colors. Now this is gonna be this is a little bit trickier. I'm not gonna just go, even though that's basically the shape I want my flame to be. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna hold my palette knife upside down and I'm gonna use the tip of it to kind of draw the bottom of the flame. Now because this is fire and not cartoons, our flame doesn't have to be shaped perfectly. It doesn't have to look like a teardrop. It can have rough edges. Just trying to keep my paint mostly at the tip here. But still think of it as frosting. You're frosting a cake or a cupcake. You don't want to gouge the cupcake and you want a good amount of frosting on there. Now I can turn it upright. And what I'm gonna do is lay my palette knife flat on it. So I'm gonna put it flat to the canvas, like that. Not with a lot of pressure, just flat. And I'm just gonna lightly push upwards. And what's gonna happen is the paint's gonna stick in some places and not in others. Now I can grab my brighter yellow. Again, leaving some marbling in there. Put it here in the middle, kind of scoot it around wherever I want it. And I'm gonna push it up again. The more movement there is in your flame, I think the more it insinuates that maybe it's windy in the room. I grabbed just a speck of my Alizarin Crimson that I had left over. I'm gonna mix it in there. And grab just a little bit. I don't have a lot on here. And the same thing, just kind of coax it into the middle there and push it around. And we are gonna add a wick here, but before we do that, let's give our books just a tiny bit more character. So I have some of the Liquitex bronze color, and this is a metallic color. And if you have any metallic color or no metallic colors, that's perfectly fine. I only chose bronze because honestly, it's the first metallic color I happened upon in my stash. If it would have been silver, I'd probably be using silver, but I'm using bronze. So like when we did the black lines here, I'm just gonna grab a tiny bit of bronze. So I'm just gonna grab a little bit, just like we did with the black, just above it, and if it overlaps it a bit, that's okay. But I don't want it to be quite that strong along that side, so I'm just gonna swipe some of it away. Let's do one in the middle of our red book. And maybe just below our black line here. Kind of swipe that away a bit so it's not so intense. Maybe I'll do a tiny bit in the middle of our yellow stripe. And if you don't like any of these, you can just scrape it right off if your paint's dry, and if it's not dry, you can put your other color over top of it again. I kind of like the little bit of antiquing that that copper color kind of adds. And I'm going to do a little bit, maybe right here, because I don't like that line. So I'm just going to cover it up with a little bit of copper. And a little hint of black while that copper's wet. Tiny speck of black just right on the tip of the palette knife. And I'm going to start inside of the flame just a little bit and drag it down. You might have to turn your palette knife a little as you go to get to the paint. And if you really want to use a brush for this part, you can. And I'm going to sign it, and I'm going to use this little flat brush just because that's all I've got on hand right now. And there, you just painted old books and a candle and flame, all with a palette knife. Now, as soon as it's completely dry, you can take a soft, damp brush and wipe away these chalk lines, and they should come off right away. I hope you guys enjoyed painting this with me, and I'm really excited to see how you interpret your books. Like I said at the beginning, you can paint these books in any colors that you like. Just find some colors that you can use to create a cohesive shadow if you don't want to use the colors that I used. I'm dedicating this painting to all of my wonderful fans who love to read, as well as my amazing husband, who's also a book publisher. If you like this video, make sure you give it a thumbs up and maybe share it with a friend who you think would like it as well. If you haven't subscribed already, please make sure you do so that you can paint with me every Tuesday, vlog with me on Thursday, and join me for a live Q&A session on Sundays. If you want your chance to see my painting videos the day before they're released, or to learn about exciting things that are coming up that nobody else knows about, you can join my Patreon page. There's some really awesome rewards in there, so make sure you check out all of them. You can find a link in the description below to my Patreon page, my Facebook page, our Art Monster Squad Facebook group, as well as my store. Thank you as always for watching, everyone, and I will see you next time.